Hi everyone, welcome back to Wallace's. I am Kate Terrell with Wallace Garden Center here in Bettendorf, Iowa, and we are coming to you today to talk about National Pollinator Week. For the past few years, the buzzwords have been all about pollinators. How do we help our bees and butterflies and all the wonderful insects and birds that help pollinate our fruits and vegetables and keep our gardens blooming? And so everyone not only wants to help, but it's something that's really easy for you to do. You don't have to put in acres and acres of blooming perennials. You can add, simply one container of flowering annuals on your patio, and that is going to help out our pollinators. So if you want to create a pollinator garden, we are here to help with that. We have pretty much everything that you're going to need. So when you're starting to think about your planning and what you're going to do, we recommend a few things. Number one is a lot of our pollinating insects, especially butterflies, they like to be in the sun. They're cold-blooded. They like to bask in the warm sun. So most of the time you're going to need a sunny or partially sunny location. So 4 to 6 hours of sun per day, doesn't matter if it's morning or afternoon. The other thing is a little bit of wind protection. If you are out in an area of new construction or out in the country where you don't have a lot of wind protection, start thinking about orientating your garden so that it is on the east side of your home where it gets morning sun but blocked from north and west wind. So the insects and the pollinators really appreciate having some protection from that. Another thing that you want to consider is having a water source. They come to feed on the nectar and feed on the plants, but they get thirsty, they get hot, and so having a fountain, a butterfly fountain, a regular fountain, or a bird bath, someplace where they can cool off, or even you can, on really hot days in the summer, you can get like a little mister end piece for your hose and have that mist out in the garden for a while. You'll see hummingbirds going to it. You'll see butterflies kind of drinking from the wet soil on the ground. So make sure you try to provide a water source, especially when it's hot outside. After that, you can also add some things of protection. You can add butterfly houses or insect houses, insect hotels, all those things that they can use for housing instead of having to make their own. So consider that. Those are great projects to do with kids. They are also great gifts if you're trying to get something for someone who's working on a pollinator garden. And then that brings us to the most important part, which is the plants. All of our pollinators, they love flowers and nectar, but we also need to consider some of the foliage that their larvae need, like especially butterfly caterpillars. When they are hatched and they start to feed, they feed on foliage before they get to flowers. Because they are out all year long, we only start to think of them in the summer. School gets out and we're out in the yard and we start to see butterflies, we start to see the bees around. But a lot of times we don't think about the fact that they're actually around starting a lot of times in early to mid-March. So think of some of the forsythia, the flowering quince, the early blooming shrubs, pansies even out in your garden. And then through the summer, there's lots and lots of stuff that will continue to bloom. And then we want to remember that until we get cooler temperatures, those pollinators are going to be around. So we want something blooming kind of March all the way through September, October. One great way to do that is to just focus on some diversity. A lot of us want to plant perennials so that when we plant them, they come up every year and bloom and we don't have to spend all this time doing our planting. That is a great thing about perennials. Most perennials, though, have a very specific bloom time, so they don't bloom from spring all the way through frost. They bloom for 3 to 6 to sometimes 8 weeks throughout the season, and then they're done. So in order to keep something interesting and delicious for our pollinators, we recommend planting a variety of perennials as well as adding in a lot of annuals. Annuals, you have to plant them every year, but they do bloom all season long and will provide a food source for your pollinators all the way up until frost. So I'm going to start today talking about our perennial selection here at Wallace's. We grow 20,000 perennials every year. They are not all pollinator plants, but a good portion of them are. And we are so proud of what we grow. We love picking out plants. We spend a lot of time looking for plants that perform well in the Midwest, that do well here, that you are going to have success with. A lot of times you'll read online or you'll see that you should only use native plants for your pollinator garden. Natives are awesome for pollinators. They are native insects. They like native plants that have been around for generations. But you can also use cultivars of those native plants. So it doesn't have to be a true native in order to help the pollinators and provide the food source that they need. One of the first plants I want to talk about today is coneflower. This is such an awesome, easy perennial to do. They're great for kind of the middle of the garden or the back of the garden because they do get taller. This is a traditional pink one, or what they call purple coneflower. They come in every shade of the rainbow now. You can get them in red, orange, yellow, white, and pink are the most traditional. They're just really easy. They love the sun. As the flowers mature, they get a nice big seed cone on the top. And so the butterflies love to land on this flat landing surface right now. And then as we get into fall, those big cones of seeds are perfect. You'll see finches and other birds coming to get the seeds off of them. So this is definitely one that's going to provide great flower source in the summer, and then also a great seed source as we go into fall. Okay, the next plant I want to talk about today is yarrow, or achillea, or achillea as some people say. Yarrow is a great perennial for so many reasons. It's an awesome butterfly plant. They have these clusters of flat top flowers, and so perfect landing pad for butterflies and bees, other insects. It also has this real fuzzy, ferny foliage that makes it deer resistant. This is a plant that loves full sun and is actually very, very heat tolerant, very, very drought tolerant once it's established. So it's something that is going to handle your hottest, driest places and still give you blooms. Flowers on this also are great dried flowers. So if you like to do bouquets and cutting, either fresh or dried, this is the plant that's going to do great for you. So it has a lot of really awesome characteristics. Typical colors, the most common is yellow. We have some awesome, deep wine red, really nice, real bright fuchsia. You can also get it in kind of these terracotta colors or even pastel pinks as well. Lots of different colors out there. It is being chosen a lot more because of its heat tolerance in our warmer summers. The one drawback to this plant, and some people think of it as an asset, is that it does tend to spread. So when you put it in the garden, it may not stay exactly where you want it to do. It will actually kind of spread out over time, and it can have a tendency to take over. So if you like your garden neat and tidy and don't like things to get out of place, this might be a plant to skip. But otherwise, the bright colors, the deer-resistant foliage, the awesome texture, and the heat tolerance make it just a really great perennial for any pollinator garden. The next plant I want to cover is one that you don't see all that often, but is becoming more and more popular. It's another sun-loving one, loves the sun, and is very heat tolerant and drought tolerant once it's established. This is a plant that blooms like an annual, even though it's a perennial. It has these long, tall flower spikes. It's a very tall plant in the garden. You want to make sure you give it enough space. Typically your flowers are going to be in the pinks, purples, and blues. The most popular one is called Blue Fortune. This is meant to be royal raspberry, and this is one that you are going to see the bees all over this plant all summer long. They absolutely love this, and it's just a really kind of easy to grow, long blooming, awesome perennial with lots of color, and the bees just go nuts for it. So this is one to definitely consider adding to get some height in your garden and some more heat tolerance and something for the bees. Another kind of awesome kind of foundation pollinator garden plant, and this is going to be one that blooms late summer and into fall. So it's going to give you that kind of later in the year time period when a lot of our other perennials are starting to go out of bloom, is Russian sage, or Perovskia. Really tall, spiky plant. This is going to be one of the bigger perennials that you see. The traditional original Russian sage can be as tall as 4 feet high and wide. I've seen them even 5 feet wide. But there are also newer varieties that stay a little smaller if you don't have that kind of room in your garden. This is another one that is going to be deer resistant. It's got foliage that is fragrant, and kind of fuzzy, and the deer just tend to stay away from it. It's got these little blue trumpet-shaped flowers. Hummingbirds love to feed off of this, and this is another one where you will see a lot of bees going to town and just really enjoying themselves. They tend to come back to this plant over and over and over again. Russian sage, really nice, blue flowers all the time, and a lot of times that time of the year when it blooms, everything else in our garden seems to be yellow, so this makes an awesome contrast to the yellow flowers that we have going on with black-eyed Susans and goldenrod. So Russian sage is one that you should definitely consider for your pollinator garden. Another great plant that I'd like to add into a pollinator garden, especially for hummingbirds, is coral bells. And this is a plant that can take partial shade as well. So if you do have a shadier part of your garden, this is one that you can put in there. This one's starting to go out of bloom, but when it does bloom, it has these kind of pink little bell-shaped flowers that hummingbirds love. And the nice thing about this plant is that the foliage gives you some really nice color throughout the year as well. This is one called wildberry, but they come in all sorts of different foliage colors, from plain old green to like a lemon lime color, all variations of purple. There are some kind of peachy and berry colored ones as well. So coral bells, just a nice kind of low moundy plant that has these really fun spikes of little bell flowers that come up, and the hummingbirds just love them. Continuing on with our awesome pollinator plants is another kind of spiky one. It's great for adding texture to the garden, is one of my favorites, which is liatris or blazing star. There are lots of different native varieties. We carry about 4 or 5 different types of liatris here at the store because this is your butterfly magnet. They are going to be all over this plant. I also love the unique way it looks. It has these real fuzzy, almost Dr. Seuss-like flowers that come up, and they have these big buds, and they actually bloom from the top down, which is different than a lot of other spike type flowers. So just a really unique texture to have in the garden. Beautiful color, kind of this pinkish purple, and just an awesome plant. And when the orange monarchs land on there, or the yellow swallowtails, they show up, and they are just awesome for your Instagram opportunities and just getting a really good up-close look at butterflies. Liatris is a must-have in a perennial garden. One of the most well-known pollinator plants that most people come to mind when they think of what they should put in their garden is bee balm or monarda. And this is an old-fashioned garden plant that's been around for a long time. But because of the renewed interest in pollinators, there are so many new varieties coming out on the market, and they have bigger flowers and brighter colors. Most importantly, they are more resistant to powdery mildew, which is a problem of some of the old-fashioned varieties. So if you've had bee balm in the past and been frustrated by disease, take a look at some of the newer ones out there, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. This has a fuzzy, fragrant leaf, which also makes it deer resistant. So if you are battling deer in your yard, this is definitely one to take a look at. And it has these really cool flowers, popular because they're trumpet shaped for the hummingbirds. They have kind of this flat top on the top, which is great for butterflies. And you will also see bees all over the bee balm flowers as well, which is where it gets its name. So this is definitely a plant that's going to please all the pollinators in the area and give you long-lasting color, usually for 6 to 8 weeks in the garden. So definitely check out bee balm. There are dwarf ones that are only 12 inches tall, on up to a lot that are around 2 feet, and then some that get as big as 4 foot tall. So you can find a spot for one of them in your garden somewhere. Whenever we talk about butterflies, the number one plant that you're always going to hear about coming up if you want to have butterflies in your yard is milkweed. Milkweed is so important in their reproductive cycle and in their continuation, especially for monarchs. So here at Wallace's, we carry about 5 different types of milkweed. Our most popular is the butterfly weed, which is Asclepias tuberosa. This comes in orange and also in a yellow flowering version. This is your number one plant for monarchs. Monarch butterflies like to lay their eggs on this plant, and where their caterpillars will come out and they will feed on this plant. So if you want monarchs in your garden, you definitely need to get this orange flowering milkweed, both for the caterpillars and for the adult butterflies that are going to feed on the nectar from the orange flowers. So definitely consider this. It's a nice mounded perennial, long blooming. It is going to bloom for a long time, weeks and weeks of bloom, and just an awesome bright orange color. There's also tall swamp milkweed. This is going to bloom later in the summer, comes in pink and white, different flower versions, and is really good for adding height in the garden. And it's also good for wet areas. So if you have an area that never seems to dry out, where you struggle with stuff that likes good drainage not surviving, swamp milkweed is something that's going to handle that. If you're a traditional gardener, sometimes having milkweed can be alarming for gardeners because of several things. One, especially with swamp milkweed, it's one that tends to spread. So you plant one in the garden one year and the next year you have 2 or 3 times as many. So this is one that is going to kind of move about, and so just be prepared for that. Also, because milkweeds are for the caterpillars and for the adult stage butterflies, you will notice holes in the leaves. You will notice caterpillars devouring entire leaves and entire stems. So they don't always look the prettiest in the garden because they're doing their job and they are feeding the larval stages of our pollinators. So when you plant milkweed and you see that they're getting chewed up, eaten up, and you see bugs all over them, just know that it's doing its job and that your pollinator garden is definitely succeeding and that you are helping the cause. Both plants are very drought tolerant and heat tolerant, so they are something you can put into the landscape and know they're going to do well for the summer and just provide you with months long of watching butterflies kind of flutter throughout your garden. There are lots and lots of shrubs out there that are also great pollinator plants. Today I'm just going to focus on one, and that is the butterfly bush. It has butterfly in its name. Also great for bees. They love this plant as well. Now in some areas, butterfly bush can be invasive and reseed and are not supposed to be planted. We are not in one of those areas, so if you're watching somewhere else, we are okay. Our winters here are very harsh, and so a lot of times our butterfly bush actually die all the way back to the ground. If you're going to plant this in the yard, be aware that when everything else comes up in the spring, you may not see any activity out of your butterfly bush until as late as the first or second week of June. So a lot of first-time gardeners will make the mistake of planting it, thinking it died, and then digging it up when realize it was just still sleeping. I always say these are the teenagers of the garden. They get up last. But once it gets warm, we get into June, they start blooming and they don't stop until frost. And they have these awesome kind of panicle-shaped flowers. They come in pinks, purples, whites. There's a few yellows out there, but lots of fuchsia, magenta, just awesome kind of jewel tone flowers. And you will have butterflies all over them. When we have them here at the store out in the yard and they're blooming, they're always covered in butterflies. I always say the butterflies are our best salespeople, because they just show how well this plant works. This is one from Proven Winners called the Pugster series, Pugster Amethyst. So this is a plant that stays fairly compact in size, but has the really large flowers of an old-fashioned butterfly bush. Some of our oldest butterfly bush varieties will get as big as 6 to 8 feet, and a lot of us just don't have the room in our yards or our gardens for them. So there are a lot of new dwarf varieties out there, so if you haven't looked at butterfly bush in a long time, definitely come see us and check out what's available, because you can now get these awesome, huge, long blooming flowers on a more compact plant and definitely enjoy all the benefits of a butterfly bush without having a huge garden out in the country that needs this space. So check out butterfly bush. It's definitely something you're going to want to have if you want butterflies.